Thumbelina. Once upon a time, there lived a lady who had no children. Her greatest wish was that she could have a little daughter to take care of and to love. But as the years went by, it seemed that she would never be blessed with a girl of her own. One day, she heard about a wise old woman who lived in the forest. Apparently, the wise old woman knew how to achieve anything and could make wishes come true. The lady decided that she would go and see her and ask for help. When she arrived at the old woman's cottage in the forest and knocked on the door, the old woman seemed to have been expecting her. "Ah, come in, my dear," she said in a soft and kind voice. "Now tell me what your heart desires." "More than anything in the world," began the lady hopefully, "I wish to have a little girl of my own." The wise old woman smiled and handed the lady a seed. "You are good and kind," she said gently, "and I know you will take care of this special seed. Go home and plant it in a pot. Whatever grows from the seed will be yours to love." The lady was puzzled, but did what the wise old woman said, and went home to plant the seed. Weeks went by, and the seed began to grow into a lush green plant. Then, gradually, a beautiful yellow flower began to grow from the plant. It grew until it had a strong stem and many velvety soft petals. Then, finally, one day the yellow flower opened, and sitting inside it was a beautiful tiny little girl. The little girl was no bigger than a thumb, and so the lady named her Thumbelina. Thumbelina lived happily with the lady. She had half a walnut shell for a bed, with rose petals for sheets and pillows. She would sometimes stay inside the house to play and talk to the lady, but most of the time she preferred to be amongst the flowers in the garden. Thumbelina loved the nature in the world around her, and would marvel at the butterflies fluttering around the flowers and the birds singing in the trees. When she watched the swallows swooping and flying in the air, she secretly hoped that one day she might be able to fly too. Early one morning, when Thumbelina was sleeping in her walnut shell in the garden, a slimy toad came hopping by. Suddenly, he spotted Thumbelina, and an idea came to him. "She is a pretty girl," he thought, "and she will make a good wife for my son. I will take her home to the marshes, and my son can marry her." Poor Thumbelina. She woke up just as the toad picked up the walnut shell and hopped away with it. When they reached the marshes, the toad placed the walnut shell on top of a lily pad surrounded by water. Then he hopped away to find his son. Thumbelina could not swim and was surrounded by water, which meant that she could not escape. Shocked at being taken from her home so suddenly, and frightened about what was to become of her, Thumbelina began to cry. Hearing her quiet sobbing, a fish swimming in the water below hurried up to ask what the matter was. "I have been taken from my home by a toad," explained Thumbelina in a shaky voice. "And the toad is going to make me marry his son."
"Don't worry,"
said the fish kindly.
"I don't like to see anyone upset. I will help you."
"How can you help?" asked Thumbelina. "You are very kind, But I don't see how you can help me.
You may be stuck on this lily pad, began the fish. But the lily pad is not stuck in the water.
The fish disappeared under the surface of the water and very cleverly began to bite through the lily pad's stem. When it was totally bitten through, the lily pad began to float away on the surface of the water, taking Thumbelina with it. "Thank you! Oh, thank you so much!" cried Thumbelina to the fish as she floated away.
"It was nothing,"
the fish called back to her.
"Always remember to be kind to others as I have been kind to you."
"I will," called Thumbelina as the fish disappeared into the distance. Thumbelina floated downstream until the water had carried her a long way from the marshes and the toad. When the lily pad finally touched land at the edge of the stream, Thumbelina climbed out and looked around her. Grass, trees, and flowers surrounded her, and that always made her feel happy. Thumbelina continued to live by the stream. She drank the fresh dew that collected in the leaves first thing in the morning, and she ate the nectar from the flowers. Often, she would lie on her back in the grass and look up at the swallows soaring in the sky above her. "One day, I will fly like that," she whispered to herself. Winter began, and Thumbelina began to feel cold and hungry. She could find no food or drink, and the ground was frozen and hard. One day, as she was shivering under a leaf, a field mouse passed by and noticed her curled up on the ground. "Oh, you poor girl," said the field mouse kindly. "You can't stay out here on your own. Come and stay with me in my little house." Thumbelina went gratefully with the field mouse to her little home underneath the bushes. It was warm and cosy, and Thumbelina was very grateful for the hot food that the field mouse gave her. "You must let me do something for you in return," said Thumbelina. "I will help you to cook and clean the house." So Thumbelina stayed with the field mouse all through the winter and helped her with all the jobs around the house. The field mouse was friends with the mole who lived under the ground near her house. One day, as spring was approaching, the field mouse suggested to Thumbelina that she might marry the mole. "He will make a good husband for you and always take care of you," said the field mouse. "You should marry him in the spring." Thumbelina was upset. She did not want to marry the mole, for that would mean she would have to live underground forever. But she did not want to disappoint the field mouse, who had been so kind to her. The field mouse encouraged Thumbelina to go and visit the mole, and so she reluctantly went to the underground tunnel where he lived. When Thumbelina reached the opening of the tunnel, she was shocked to find a bird lying wounded on the ground. As she went closer, she realised that the bird was a swallow and that he was dying. Tears came to Thumbelina's eyes as she forgot about her own troubles and thought about the swallow. "He is probably one of the swallows that I have watched flying above me in the sky," she thought to herself. "I must look after him and try to make him well again." Every day from then on, Thumbelina cared for the bird and took him food and water. Gradually, as the days began to get warmer, the swallow began to get stronger. Thumbelina was so happy that the swallow was recovering, but as each day passed and spring approached, Thumbelina knew that the time was coming when she would have to marry the mole. Finally, one bright, warm morning, the swallow stretched his wings and announced that he was ready to fly away. "Thank you, dear Thumbelina, for all your kindness," he said with gratitude. "I will never forget you and all you have done for me. I hope we can always be friends." Thumbelina could not bear to hear the swallow's kind words and turned her head away as the tears welled up in her eyes. "Why, Thumbelina, what is the matter?" asked the swallow with concern. "I will not be able to be friends with you, swallow," whispered Thumbelina tearfully. "You see, I must marry the mole and live underground. I will never see the sunshine again." The swallow shook his head and walked up to Thumbelina. "That will not happen, my sweet Thumbelina," he said gently. "You showed me kindness when I was most in need, and now I shall do the same for you." Before she even knew what was happening, the swallow pushed her onto his back and flew high into the air, leaving the underground tunnel behind them. Thumbelina gasped in amazement and delight. "Oh, I am flying!" she cried. "At last! I am truly flying!" Thumbelina felt as though she was leaving all her cares and worries behind her, and her heart soared with relief as they flew far away. "Where are we going, Swallow?" asked Thumbelina, after they had flown for many hours. "To a different country, where it is always warm," replied the swallow. And he continued flying until, at last, they arrived at their destination. The swallow flew down to the ground, and Thumbelina hopped off his back. She looked around her, and then she blinked and looked again. Everywhere she looked were beautiful flowers, and inside each flower was a tiny person just like herself. Thumbelina had never seen others like herself before, and she suddenly realized that she must be home, her real home. She turned to the swallow and hugged him. "Oh, thank you so much, Swallow, for bringing me here," said Thumbelina gratefully. "How can I ever thank you?" "You do not need to thank me," said the swallow seriously. "You know the meaning of true kindness, and you deserve to be happy." The flower people welcomed Thumbelina, and she lived amongst them, happily ever after.